Theology Unplugged.
Welcome to Theology Unplugged. I'm Michael Patton, and today I want to talk to you guys. We're going to get back to the Through Theology in a Year, I promise. I keep on saying that. It's been a couple of weeks, but I told you guys it would be a couple of weeks as I prepare, as I'm doing some things. I would tell you how I prepare, but you just think I was weird, and the pattern I go in is a very awkward pattern that I would never suggest for anybody. But it will be done. I get things done eventually, and we're actually moving pretty fast. I mean, it's 60 sessions of Introduction to Theology. Forget it. I could talk about that for a long time. But what I do want to talk to you about is something that I always talk about, and that's Roman Catholicism. Now, many of you may say, why does Michael always talk about Roman Catholicism? I mean, whenever he's doing one of these side podcasts that's not on a theme, not the Through Theology in a Year or something like that, he's always talking about Rome. He's always talking about the Pope or swimming the Tiber or something like that. By the way, swimming the Tiber, just for those of you who don't know, is a phrase that you use whenever a Protestant becomes Catholic. To swim the Tiber is the Tiber River, and you're going to Rome from the other side. But anyway, so I do talk about this a lot. One thing I don't want you to think, I don't want Catholics to think this way, it's a sign of respect. I respect Catholicism. I really do. I respect it for a lot of reasons. I've told you guys this before. But I also recognize that Protestants try to find their place in this kind of big sea. Everybody does. I mean, Roman Catholics try to figure out who they are, and Eastern Orthodox try to figure out who they are. And I want us to understand who we are, and I use contrasts. And Rome is a good contrast. Not that I believe that Roman Catholics aren't saved or they can't be saved. I mean, my general position on it is the same as it always has. The gospel is harder to find in Roman Catholicism, but Jesus is there, and they have been a champion for a long time as an institution of defending the doctrine of the Trinity and the doctrine of Christ, which I have great respect for, and our status before God is wrapped up in one question. Who do you say that I am? That question, most important question ever asked, ever uttered. There's never been a more important question in the history of the world than when whenever Jesus turned to Peter and the rest of the apostles in Matthew chapter 16 and said, "Who do men say that I am?" They told him. There was already a bunch of different views about who Christ was. While he was living, there was already alternative views. If you don't think there'd be alternative views today, you're wrong, because everybody takes the pure thing and tries to pollute it, tries to make it something that it's not, and Christ is that purest thing that has ever been here on the earth. And after they said, some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah. So, I mean, everybody has their theories, Christ, on who you are. And Christ, instead of, saying, I wonder why they have those theories. I wonder what's going on with them. Why are they so dumb? He doesn't say that. He turns to the rest of the apostles and doesn't assume they have it right. And he turns to Peter and say, "Who do you say that I am?" And I think he was kind of, saying you to Peter, but to the rest of the apostles as well. And Peter said, "You're the Christ, the Son of the living God. You're the Messiah. You're the promised one. You're the one that the Old Testament talked about." So whenever I talk about these things, I want you to understand the unity we have with many people, including Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholics. No matter whether they feel that unity or act like it, I do believe those who have that true confession of faith in Christ are part of the same family. Maybe messed up people in the family. We all have them. We've all had those kind of people that we stay away from because we don't have as good a fellowship, and it's unfortunate, but that's the way it is whenever it comes to the Christian family. Now, having said all that, whenever you say, "Who do you say that I am?" Whenever we talk about Rome, and what I want to talk about today is a common there's a lot of common apologetics, and another reason I respect Rome is because they take their faith seriously, or they can take their faith seriously. A lot of faiths out there that's just kind of blind leaps and they take their practice seriously, but they don't really take their faith seriously. And I have seen in Rome, I mean, the history of Roman Catholicism, the history of this as an institution that has people underneath it that submit to it, they have valued the mind. And so they do think through things. And they do have philosophy. They do have theology. They do have apologetics. Maybe not in the same way that you and I as Protestants do, but in a very different way, in a very real way. And one of the apologetics, one of the things that they will come, if they're in the know, right? If they're people who are studied and learned Catholics, they will have many reasons why they are Catholic and not Protestant. And big criticism on Protestants. For them, Protestantism basically, was the member of the family that said, "Hey, you have it all wrong." They feel like you were talking back to the parents, and these kids left and went on their own rebellious way. That's the way they think of us. Would kind of like what how Eastern Orthodoxy thinks about Rome, because in 1054, Eastern Orthodox will think Rome became rebellious and left the church. Everybody's got this one true church, and this one true church is what they want to identify with, and it's defined differently. And one of the things that they will say, coming all the way back around, one of the things that they will say is that Protestantism has, I don't know, it depends on who you talk to, and it depends on what the meme is, or it depends upon when they heard this, because people will take it and repeat. We always do that. We always take and repeat things that we like that confirm our prejudice, and it sounds good. So this sounds good to a lot of Roman Catholics, and they'll say, that Protestantism has 33,000 different denominations, and we have one. Rome is united. You guys are hopelessly divided, and you can never become united, because we can see through the history of the church, it just doesn't happen. You guys may all, 33,000 denominations, may all claim that the Bible is your only source, or your final source, or your ultimate source, sola scriptura, the scripture alone is infallible. You guys may claim that, but whenever you look to the scripture alone, look at you guys. You guys are all coming up with different interpretations. You guys are all hopelessly divided. And this is very effective. It really is. I mean, from the standpoint of the Catholic, I think it's effective for them to stay in the Catholic Church and not consider Protestantism. And for the Protestant, many Protestants get flustered by this and say, "Wow, I've never thought of it that way. You're right. How do we get united?" And Rome will say, "Come swim the Tiber. Become one of us." What you'll find is an institution that for the last 2,000 years, being the church that Christ established for the last 2,000 years, we have defined the gospel according to our leadership, our magisterium. We look to the church itself, the institution, and say, what are we supposed to believe? What are the essentials? For you guys, Protestants, you guys have you don't have anybody to look to. And so you all try to look to the Bible, and look at this, hopelessly divided, because the Bible is not enough. You have to have a living authority. You have to have a magisterium, and ultimately for them you'd have to have a pope, right? Because that's what the pope has been instituted for, is to bind on earth and bind in heaven, having the authority to make decisions. So it's kind of like, if you think of it this way, it's they'll say, we have got the Constitution and the Supreme Court. Right? You guys just have the Constitution, and you guys don't know what to say about it. You guys don't know how to interpret it. But here's us with this Supreme Court, who tells us how we are supposed to interpret the Constitution of our faith. And so you're wild, you're crazy, you're libertarian, you're beyond hope because you're lawless. what we would call that in theological circles is antinomian, against the law. So it seems to be a very effective critique. And I'm speaking out loud here because I just heard this again yesterday. I wrote something about it, I think, on my blog at patreon.com. Patreon.com/the Michael Patton. By the way, that's the way to support me. That is the place to go. Here it is. I'll put it up there for you. But anyway, and please, I do need your support. This is the way I make my living, and I'd love to have you as part of the Patreon. I'd be honored to. Thank you. But whenever you have this situation where the 33,000 denominations, and you guys don't have any place to go, you're interpreting, you're wild, you're without law, antinomian. It can't be true. That can't be the church, the one church that Christ established, the one that he prayed for in John chapter 17 and said to the Father, let them be one as we are one. That's what he prayed for. So we are the one, come back to us, swim the Tiber. And here's the problems with that. Number one, probably the biggest problem, I think the most glaring one, is this. For some reason, in the mind of Roman Catholics, because they have this name Catholic, and because they have this institution that goes back, from their standpoint, all the way back to the beginning, which Protestants would not concede that by any means, but because they say this, and because, Rome is so beautiful, Catholicism is so beautiful, we've just got these things that we got canon law that has lasted forever. We follow by it. We are the true ones who look to history. You guys can't, because you'll never find yourself. You guys can't look through the family photo album because there are no pictures of you, but there's just pictures of us as we are younger. Here's the problem. Number one, whenever you divide it as 33,000 verse 1, this 1 sounds a whole lot more appealing. But the problem is, everybody claims this. Why does Rome? I mean, there's very few people who would say that the church, that their denomination, their tradition is restorationist. In other words, the gospel was lost, everything was gone, and for the first time we have it. That's Mormons, that's Jehovah's Witnesses, that's a few different people out there. I don't know, but historic magisterial Protestantism, historic Protestantism has never said that. Historic Protestantism would never give the benefit of the doubt to Rome and say, oh, yeah, you are the one church, and we are 33,000, and, we don't know what to do, but hopefully one of ours is correct. Here's what they would say is, why do you get special pleading? Why are you this one away from the 33,000? 33,001, if you say there's 33,000 denominations, there's really 33,001 because you're a part of this big group. Just because you're not called a denomination doesn't mean you are not a sub-tradition within Christianity, one of the many options. And if you say there are this many options, you're just saying this big umbrella tent called Protestantism has this many options. And yes, but Protestantism is not, just like you said, it's not unified. It is not something that you can refer to and then say they are all divided based upon this. I mean, are you talking about Baptists or Presbyterians or Methodists or Anglicans, all of whom would claim that they have historic credentials that go back to the very beginning? Rome would say, wait a minute, no, they don't. Because they don't claim that there has been apostolic succession, the Supreme Court that has gone back from the very beginning. Yeah, that's right. They don't. But just because you claim to have a Supreme Court in a situation that we say there is no Supreme Court, There is no authoritative, infallible guide that tells us how to interpret it. Just because you say there is, and we have this one called the Supreme Court, doesn't separate you from the 33,000. You are 33,001. What makes yours more credentialed to go back to the very beginning and represent the true church any more than one of these others? You see, it's not just because you claim it, it's not special pleading. It's not we're just going to give this to you. It's kind of like if you've ever been in a controversy about the Bible, and talking about which Bible translation to use, which we'll talk about soon whenever we get into bibliology and hermeneutics, the next one we have coming up. But here I have an ESV. And so an ESV is a version of the Bible. So you got lots of versions of the English Bible. We have an embarrassment of riches, as they say, whenever it comes to translations into English. We've got so many to choose from. It's great. It really is. But somebody may come up to you and say someday, did you know that there are all these translations that are satanic translations, and then there's the King James? It's called King James onlyism. And King James only people do truly believe that the King James is the only Bible that represents the original, and all others are Satan influenced. And there's radical and there's less radical people. I used to be involved in a King James only movement. I've told you guys this before. Back in 1996, 97, I don't remember what it was. No, 1998. But anyway, I knew how they thought very well and how they proclaimed all other Bible translations as satanic. And here's what they would do. They would take the King James Bible. I said, how do you know it's satanic? They'd say, watch this. And they would read something from the King James and then bring up a new international version, a different version translated from the, Greek and Hebrew. Old Testament was written in Hebrew, New Testament was written in Greek, and these Bible translations were created from manuscripts, oftentimes the very same manuscripts. They just have different decisions, and whether they're trying to make it word for word or more readable, more accurate, whatever it is, their philosophy. People have different translation philosophies, just like anybody that's a translator. They're never going to say the exact same thing. So we got lots of different translations, and King James only people will come up and say, watch this, I'm going to read from Matthew chapter 16, where it says, who do men say that I am? And so reading in the King James, it says, I don't know what it says in the King James. Let me bring that up. I could bring that up really quickly. But what they will do is they'll say, in the King James, you have a translation, and then they will bring up other translations, other options besides the King James. And then they will say, watch how all these other options differ from the King James. And you say, okay, so what? They say, well, watch this. They took away, I don't even know if Matthew chapter 16 would be the best representative of what I'm talking about here, but I'm going to go ahead and assume that it will be sufficient. Okay, so Matthew chapter 16, verse 20, let's see here. There we go. Simon Peter, okay, here we go. And they said, some said, okay, I'm going to read this one, Matthew chapter 16, verse 15. And in the English, or in the King James Bible, in the King James Version, it says, He saith unto them, but whom say ye that I am? Who do you say that I am? See how it's different right there, right? But whom say ye that I am? Now, watch this. I'm going to read it from the ESV, and it said, He said to them, but who do you say that I am? Did you notice? He changed it. There is no more who do you saith that I am. It's who do you say that I am? And then they'll say, based upon, and I'm telling you, this is how they do it. Based upon that, how your version differs from mine shows that yours is the wrong one and it is satanic. And I always say, wait a minute. Why do we start with yours? Why is yours the standard? Because isn't that, if yours is the standard, isn't it assuming that it's the right one, and then you're going to prove that it's the right one by using it to show that it's the right one? But you have to assume that it's. This is called circular reasoning. This is called begging the question. That's how you really use begging the question. Is that, I mean, we use it colloquially in a wrong way. I mean, begging the question. You know, it's always something that demands an answer. Like, this begs the question of why is he doing this? No, begging the question is circular reasoning. Begging the question is assuming the point you're trying to prove in order to prove that point. So King James people start with the King James Bible and say, watch, here's what the King James says, and watch how these versions differ. I'm assuming that the King James is correct, and therefore showing how these are in error because they do not align with the King James, and therefore that shows that they're incorrect. You see, circular reasoning. And so this is the way that people will often use, and they use it in all kinds of ways with the King James. They'll go, watch how this version took away the word Jesus and replaced it with Christ, or take away the word Christ and replaced it with the pronoun he. And then they, get all up in arms because, look, they're trying to take Christ out of the Bible. They change it to he. King James Bible has Christ, 9,000 times or 900 times, and the other translations don't have him any more than 800 because they put he or Jesus, not Christ. So they're trying to make Jesus not Christ anymore. You see what I'm saying? You got to assume. Now, with this denominations thing, you're saying, let's assume that the Roman Catholics are right, and let's start with the argument with that. Now, you've got the one true church over here, the one united. That's why it's true. That's how the begging goes. It's united. It is the only one that qualifies as the true church because it's the one church. And then these 33,000. Now, automatically you've lost because you're trying to argue that the one church that Christ established was the Catholic Church by saying, look how many you guys have that are wrong, and look how many we have that are right. One. You guys have 33,000. See? Get it? It doesn't work because all you are is one option in this 33,000. Like I said, 33,001. Now, that's number one. That's the problem with it. They do not, you cannot give anybody special pleading. But problem number two is this, that whenever you're talking about problem number two really is this, that 33,000 is a completely exaggerated number, has been shown to be false so many times. And that was a number that was taken. It's gone even higher, I think, if you still are taking it that way. This is back in 2006, I think, whenever I first heard the 33,000 denominations argument. No, it was all the way back in 2002 or 3, but probably came in the late 90s. But it was based upon basically a governmental census. I know it was wrong, and I'm pretty sure that it was all based upon a governmental census and how many churches applied for tax-exempt status. So if you are starting a church and you're not a Baptist, you're not Presbyterian, you're not identifying with any pre-established organization or denomination, then you have to apply by yourself. So it's the first Credo Church of Edmond, Oklahoma. And I'm not Baptist, I'm not any denomination, I'm just independent. Well, if I'm independent, I have to file for this by myself, file for tax-exempt status. Therefore, the government will count me as a denomination. So individual churches become denominations at that point. Every church that has ever filed for tax-exempt status and is not identifying with another tradition is one of these. Really what it comes down to, I could say, listen, there's about 10 or 15 denominations primarily. And then there's a lot of independent churches. And you got 10 or 15, and then these independent churches that are really closely aligned, like Bible churches, community churches, evangelical type churches, and there's broad kind of overview within this even. And if you're an evangelical, you can be an evangelical Baptist or an independent or Presbyterian. And this evangelical kind of says, let's create this oneness based upon how we all agree on these certain areas. So it's not that easy, okay? And even if there's only 10 or 15, maybe let's say there's 100, or one guy I heard, he said he counted them all, and here's legitimately what it was. He said it was around 900. So let's just say it's around 900. Again, it's just 901 because you forgot the Catholics. You forgot it. They have tax exempt status. So they belong in that number. How you're doing it, how you're counting them, you got to be consistent. You can't assume, again, beg the question and say, no, we don't have to count that way because we are the one true church. So we don't belong in that grouping. Yes, you do, right? So does Eastern Orthodoxy, for that matter. So it's not Protestants. We're not claiming, here's this Protestants that is filing for tax-exempt status, and then the Catholics do, and the Eastern Orthodox. That is not how it happens. There are many, many traditions. The goal is not to try to say, by fiat, by statement alone, by question begging, that our church is the one true church, and then let's move on from there. It's, let's see whose church best represents what it is that has begun, that Christ established. That's the goal. Whatever Christ established, let's see if we can get back there. No matter how you get back there, whether you hop, skip, or jump through church history, or you plow through it and find yourself everywhere, or you have an institutional name that pulls you through all of church history, it doesn't matter. Nobody gets special pleading. Okay? So what you have is you have this situation where we are being accused of not being the true church simply because we're not part of the one true church and we are part of this 33,000 Protestants. That is, don't assume that. You can't assume that. Everybody has to start with their own individual arguments. And basically it's this. Just because you claim to have a Supreme Court doesn't mean you have a Supreme Court. Okay? You don't. You say you have a Supreme Court. I don't. I say you have the same type of court we all do. Whatever it is that are the establishing documents of whatever tradition it is, and then you find that tradition itself. And they're not easy to find. Defining Rome is not easy. There are divisions within Rome. There are plenty of divisions. So that would be number 3, though. There are plenty of divisions within Rome itself. It is not as united as you think. But within those divisions, you might choose one. So let's say there's 1,000 Protestant denominations, and let's say there's 10 Catholic. All that does is make it 1,010 that we have to choose from. And you don't have to automatically assume that 1,009 of those are evil or bad, kind of like the King James. Start with this, and then there's 100 other translations, and they're all from Satan. Where do you get that? See, you're starting with all of these assumptions that I can't give to you, and I shouldn't give to you. That would be irresponsible, because I think here we are. There is no Supreme Court in the way that you speak of it, at least, because you say it's an infallible Supreme Court. I mean, even in America, we don't have an infallible Supreme Court, right? They're fallible. America is defined by the Constitution. The Supreme Court interprets the Constitution. We do not believe the Supreme Court is infallible. You do. Okay, so we have our own Supreme Court. Sometimes Baptist, the confessions of the Baptist, the Westminster Confession of the Presbyterians, there's all kinds of confessions that the different traditions, Lutheran, they all have their different confessions, their own kind of Supreme Court. That is not their Constitution. The confessions are their Constitution. The Bible is the Constitution for everybody. We agree upon that. You're starting with the assumption that your Supreme Court is the one true Supreme Court and it's infallible. I don't give you that. I can't give you that. That is irresponsible. Let's make arguments ourselves. Let's understand it. I do not believe that you have to have an infallible Supreme Court in order to have an accurate interpretation or sufficient interpretation of this book. You do. Okay, you're starting with that assumption. I can't give you that. So we've got all kinds of issues we've got to talk about beforehand. You cannot use the 33,000 denominations to shut me down real quick. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. The Supreme Court, if there is one, is it's a living and fallible Supreme Court. You say it's a living and infallible Supreme Court. Okay? And again, just because you have a Supreme Court doesn't mean everybody has to have one. I might just want to go back to the Constitution and read it myself. I'd rather have the entirety of church history agree with me, but nobody has that. Nobody has that option. Nobody can go back and find themselves perfectly. You look through your photo album and you go back and there's different stages. And sometimes it doesn't look quite like you. Sometimes it does. Sometimes you've gained a bunch of weight, kind of like me. Or you've lost a bunch of weight, kind of like me. Back and forth, right? That's what I'm going to do. So you may not be able to find yourself in this history, but oftentimes you really can. You could say, wait a minute. All these people, they kind of seem very similar. They have the same nose. They have the same ears. Most of them have, the same eye color, that kind of thing. We can find traits that make us part of the family. And I think that you can find that if there is 1,010 denominations in Christianity. I think most of those you're going to be able to find at least many of the traits of Christianity in them. Do you find the essential traits? Do you find that DNA that makes you family? Now, I don't know how DNA works, and I don't know how to tell you, okay, this is how they tell if somebody's related to somebody else. But however they do that, there is some way that you can find these essential elements in your DNA. And I, as a Protestant, believe this. I believe there are essential elements in our DNA that we find all through church history. You don't have to have an institution that's guiding it. Institution fails. It is not. We do not start with the assumption that it's infallible. There's no reason to. So therefore, just like any other man outside of God, we start with the assumption that it is fallible. Okay? You have to make the argument that it's infallible. And if you can't make the argument that it's infallible, all we're doing is looking back through the family album. We're looking back through the DNA chain, and we're saying, what are the essential elements of that DNA? Now, all of this started whenever I was watching somebody talk about how Protestants cannot define the essentials. They have no clue what the essentials are because the argument was there are 33,000 different denominations, and therefore 33,000 different, mind you, this was the basic assumption, different understanding on what the essentials were. Some people would have an essential of believer's baptism. Some people would have an essential of pre-tribulationalist rapture. Some people would have the essential of an inerrant scripture. Some people would have an essential of that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Now, wait a minute. When you look through all these traits for 2,000 years in church history, here's what I say. Here's a common sense way to take it. Whenever you find a trait in all people of all places, everywhere, from the very beginning, what do they have the same? You might say, well, they all have a nose. Okay, good. They have a nose. Let's put it even more broadly. They have a head, they have 2 arms, they have 2 legs, and they have a body. You say, okay, good. Let's say that's the human DNA. That's what we're looking for. So we're looking through the family album, we're looking for humans instead of monkeys and giraffes and stuff like that. And here we have 33,000 different representations. And half of them, let's say, have all these traits. Have a head, have an arms, have a body, and have legs. And you say, well, doesn't that make them a human, at least by looking at it? Isn't that kind of a common sense way to say these are people? They're not giraffes? I would say that. So whenever I'm looking back and whenever I read through this Bible and I see the center of the Bible, the most important person, the confession that is made, the way to tell whether you are a Christian or not is what do you do with Christ? Who is your eyes set upon? Who is your hope? Whenever you're looking for hope, who's the one you go to? Do you go to yourself? Do you go to your money? Do you go to your pastor? Or do you ultimately go to Christ? You might go to all these things, right? But you find Christ. Oh yeah, I do go to Christ. Christ is the center of all these things, but I go to all these different places. Okay, so Christ is one of those elements. What about Christ? What does everybody say from the very beginning? Whenever you look at every family member, what do they all say about Christ? Well, they all say that he died on the cross and he rose from the grave. What for? For our sins. They might disagree upon how that takes place, whether it's a transaction made to God or to the devil, or whether, however it happens, they may say, we have no clue how it happens, but something happened on that cross where my sins are taken. My sins are forgiven. It gave him the ability. It gave God a license from his standpoint to forgive me. Okay, however you say it, I don't care. You can be wrong about the interpretations. But we all agree on these things. The person and work of Christ. I think the person and work of Christ is the easiest thing to identify the human DNA for the last 2,000 years. You get the analogy. It's the Christian DNA for the last 2,000 years. We're all part of the same family if we all confess, truly confess, he is truly our hope. It's that we really look. He's not one among many. Yeah, I have Christ, plus I have Muhammad, and I have a bunch of these other deities. Just like that guy. What was it? The Mummy. Have you ever seen the movie The Mummy? Great movie. But in the movie, I think it's 2001 or 1999. I don't know. But the guy that's in it had all these different necklaces, and whenever the mummy came up to him, and the mummy was really scary, and he appeared for the first time, the guy's shaking, he's backing off as the mummy's slowly approaching him, looking like he's going to kill him. And so suddenly he looks down at his necklaces, and he pulls up this Star of David. And he tried to put it in his face, and the mummy kept on coming, and he goes, no? Okay. Let me find another. And he pulls out the Islamic moon, the moon crescent, and tries it. And he's like, no? Okay, try this. And he pulls up the cross. That's the way sometimes I think some people look at Christ. And that's not what I mean. That is not what I mean. I'm saying, is he the hope? Is he the center of who your beliefs identify with? If he's just a side, and you've got many beliefs besides that, you take in what the culture has here. It's kind of like a smorgasbord. You're pulling in whatever you like the most from everywhere. And I like Christ. I like the way he does that Sermon on the Mount thing. I like Christ, and I like the way he says, do unto others, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I guess I'm a Christian. Yeah, I guess I worship Christ. No. You're not understanding what I'm saying. How are you going to stand before God whenever he says, what in the world do I do with you? Are you going to say, well, nothing. I mean, I'm good. I did good. Oh, yeah, there's that Christ thing, too. Can I get that now? Because I believed in it beforehand, I think. No, he's the center of your hope. He is the apex. He is that which you will say, Christ is my hope. Christ is the reason that you should, as Dean James Kennedy used to put it, when you die, if you were to die today and you were standing before God, and God said, why should I let you into my heaven? What would you say? And you'd say, Christ, that's it. You may say, I don't think you should. But I trust the best I got is Christ because he was my only hope. That's good. That's enough. That's it. Because he is your hope at that point. Well, none of us hope in him perfectly, but he is your hope. Whenever you stand before God, you have no deserving in and of yourself. You say, I don't know, there's something that happened 2,000 years ago, and this guy died on the cross and rose from the grave. The Son of God, Jesus Christ. He died on the cross and rose from the grave, and somehow that saves me. I don't know how. That's good enough, because it's your only hope. But if you go like this, well, let's see here. There's the church, there's Mary, there's the saints. Here's all these side things. And then you say, oh, yeah, I forgot about Christ. Yeah, him too. All of these people. I don't know where you stand there because I don't know if Christ is really your hope. I know sometimes we have other things that we place in there, and I'm not saying that you have to be perfect in your trust, because sometimes you trust in Christ, but you trust in, let's say, what Mary, how his mother gains Christ's power and what happened on the cross and then gives it to you, or how the church, the Pope, has this deposit that Christ bought with the cross and distributes it through forgiveness and through, whatever the means are whenever you sin. You're still saying Christ is the center of all this. I think it's wrong. I think it's completely wrong, and I think you need a it's gonna keep you from the fullness of the gospel. And I know you hate me saying that, especially Catholics, because you guys like to say that. But it is. I mean, we believe that we have the fullness of the gospel because we have Christ alone. Sola Christus. Not only are we sola scriptura, by the scripture alone is our final and only infallible authority, but Christ alone. It's not the Pope, it's not Mary, it's not the saints. We have no other hope but Christ alone. So that's what I would say there. And I would also say, but if you find in your DNA, which I find Catholics, they have the right confession about Christ. Everything, whether I like it or not, which I don't, everything is built around Christ. Everything is. I mean, Mary and the power of the church, everything that is built around Christ and what Christ did. The Mass, the sacrifice, that's all built around Christ. I do not agree with any of that. I don't think you get to the graces of God that way. And I can't wait for you to get to heaven and realize that you didn't have to go through all that. It was Christ alone that saved you. And you tried to pile upon that so many other things. But at least Christ was the center of what built what it is that you believe. And sometimes we get this dross, we get these additives on top of Christ because we're scared. Maybe it's Christ alone plus baptism. Maybe it's Christ alone plus going to church. Maybe it's Christ alone plus, going to a priest that Christ, appointed. Those are all side things, and I think they deter and they pull us away whenever we set our hopes on them. I'm not saying they're wrong because their functionality could be used of God, but not in the way you think. Okay, I don't want to get too complicated with this because it is it's very simple the way I'm looking at it. For the last 2,000 years, I see this character trait of Christ, who he is, what he did. And whenever I find that, I find my family. That's the argument I make. And so it's very easy, what the initial question that started all this was, how do Protestants, and I don't like that, you're assuming something, but even if I gave you that, how do Protestants know what the essentials are? Well, I'll tell you how I know what the essentials are, and let's argue about that. Okay? Let's talk about it. I think Christ is the essential. I think who he is and what he did, and what it is that you say to the question, who do men say that I am? That's it. That's what defines you as part of the family or not. Now let's go from there. Don't go from this 33,000, 33,001, 1,000, 1,009, 1,010, whatever number you have, it doesn't matter because it's just you and I right now. And we're just talking about this. And I want to hear what it is that you have to say about these last 2,000 years, who it is that is the center of your hope, and how it is that applies for these 10,000 years. And we can talk about we can talk about the Constitution. We can talk about the Supreme Court. We can talk about appellate courts. We can talk about all that stuff if you want, analogously. But here it is. We got to start something. What defines, like so much of what we're doing today, what defines this country? What defines America? Is it somebody's opinion out on the street? Is it that person? Or was there something that began it all? And what was that began it? We have to do due diligence to find this stuff. Like I said, I don't think it's that hard. I think within 10 minutes I could show you in the Bible how Christ is that center, and that whoever believes in him is part of the family and has, in a present tense, eternal life. Not might have eternal life later on. Not might have if they make it far enough. If you can ever say you have eternal life, it's over, because it's a present thing, and eternity starts right then. If you could lose it, then it doesn't. You never have it. You might have it later on, but right now you have it potentially. But Christ doesn't say that. Whoever believes in him has eternal life and is passed from death to life. Okay, guys, get ready. Once again, I've told you, get ready for what is coming, and that is the bibliology and hermeneutics section of our Through Theology in a Year. I want you guys all there. And if you look at this podcast, wherever you're at, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, wherever you're at, you can look at it and you can find that we have been doing this for a long, long time. As a matter of fact, this podcast is one of the earliest theological podcasts ever. We started this 2006. Now, I'm not saying I was consistent and did everything right, whatever. You guys know my history. And if you don't, look at it. It'll be humbling for you to see the history of Credo House Ministries, the history of me and what I have done with this ministry. But I'll tell you one thing, it has always been about theology. It has always been about putting confidence in you. It has always been about my belief, my deep down belief that you, as a normal person, not only need theology very badly, but will love it because you're a Christian. Will love it. If I continue that analogy, here's humanity. What do we love? We love food and water. Theology is part of this because it talks about Christ. It's who he is. Who do men say that I am? That is a theological question. So I am under the assumption, number one, that you can do theology. You can understand it. Number two, that you'll love it. That you will absolutely love it. I guess number three is that there's a center that will unify us, and that is Christ. Help me, come with me to let me make that argument to you. I make it all the time. As a matter of fact, if you go back, maybe, I don't know where it's at, maybe around session 25, 30, somewhere around there, you'll find essentials and non-essentials. And you'll see me define this for hour after hour after hour, how it is we define essentials. And that is theology. If you want to go back and see that, it's a few months ago, or 2 or 3 months ago, you can find it. But I have it all over. I mean, there's lots more podcasts besides the Through Theology here. I hope you join us. Thank you for joining us for this one. We'll see you next time.
Theology Unplugged.